jump ahead to Adventures Out West. So the first thing, posing the question, and you can kind of ignore all the dates there for a minute, but kind of posing the question, why did you sign up for the program? Why was this appealing to you? And then if there's something that you want to learn, what is that question? So we'll give you a couple minutes to kind of type in an answer there pretty quickly, but let us know why you want to go out west, why you want to have Adventures Out West, or why you signed up for this program. And Ashley's going to call those out to me in just a minute. So the reason I have all of these dates here, I'm not going to go into detail with all of them, but you can see, and the reason that I kind of pulled all of these dates together is 1862 is the latest date on there, and that's the Homestead Act. So if you're not familiar, that's when our government said, hey, go out west, claim some land, take care of it for a little while, and then we'll give you however many acres that was. So kind of the idea of going out west, it's not a new thing, obviously, but it's less than 200 years old, right? Right around there. So kind of a cool thing. California State Parks existed 1864. That's the first state park system in the country. That's still fairly new, especially if you compare things to like Europe and those sorts of places. The first state park in California was actually Yosemite. So Yosemite National Park was the first state park before the first national park, 1872, came into existence. Which a lot of you probably know is Yellowstone. So Yellowstone, being in Montana, was the first actual national park, although the National Park Service didn't exist for a long time after that. The National Park Service didn't exist till 1916. The next one there, the Bureau of Land Management. Some of you, if you've never been out west, may have never even heard of the Bureau of Land Management. So west of the Mississippi, the Bureau of Land Management owns and operates 60-70% of the land. So huge parts of Wyoming, huge parts of Utah, huge parts of Arizona. And the Bureau of Land Management is a spot that I'll reference because it's where a lot of people camp, because camping is either very inexpensive or free. Not a lot of amenities, but a great place to be where there's not a lot of other people. So it's interesting to know the Bureau of Land Management, before it was called that in 1946, it was actually the Office of Grazing. So Bureau of Land Management still does a lot of permits for cattle grazing, oil leases, those sort of things. And the last two on there, we're familiar with the Wilderness Act, hopefully in 1964, setting aside some of these places. And then I threw in Ohio State Park just so that we know Ohio State Park system is fairly young, right? So even though 1862 and 1864 is pretty young, just the idea of going out west and protecting these wild places is still kind of a new thing. So Ashley, do we have anybody saying why they signed up or where they want to go or adventures they've been on?
We sure do. So we've got folks who have general interest in learning their options.
Nice.
Who are interested in learning about going out west specifically. And then we've got folks who are retiring and it's their dream to car camp out west. So
nice.
Some very general interest.
So those of you that are just interested in getting ideas, we're going to address all of that. Those of you that are approaching retirement or retiring and going to be able to have large chunks of time to do this, I'm a little bit jealous. But with that being said, we will address a lot of those things. So continue. If you have a question, need a clarification, please let us know. But yeah, so we go out west because it's different, right? Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? Ohio is beautiful. Love Ohio, but it's not like certain places you're going to see out west. So all of these photos, except for I think one, are pictures that I've taken over the past 20 years of places that I've been out west. So this is why we go out. This photo that's up here, this is a great place, right? This is Canyonlands, so this is southern Utah. Very specifically, this is one of the hiking trails, and this is looking over the White Rim. So kind of obvious why it's named the White Rim. But just understand perspective, that there are probably four-wheel drive trucks and Jeeps in that picture, because that's something that's allowed on the White Rim Trail. It's 100 miles, just under 100 miles. And that's a place that people go to have different adventures as well. But just know the vastness of how big that is. I like to think of that picture just as a big footprint. So the next photo here, kind of similar, right? Obviously not the desert. but just another gorgeous place. So this is a photo, I don't know, it's probably a lot older than I think it is. I probably took this photo 12 or 13 years ago. This is Glacier National Park. So kind of the northeast entrance. This is a gorgeous place in Glacier. Very popular photo, you know, makes it into lots of postcards. So next picture too, same thing, just another beautiful spot. So we're back in southern Utah. This is Bryce Canyon, a little closer towards Las Vegas and St. George, kind of southwest, a little bit further would be those areas. So it's a place that a lot of people see quickly, just because Bryce is so close to Las Vegas, and flights to Las Vegas are cheap. So if you're retired or you have less time, that's a place where a lot of people go. So southwest, you see Bryce Canyon, you see, you know, maybe Arches and Zion and those sort of places. But again, this is why we go out, right? We want to see these photos. This next photo is probably a little more popular, probably a little bit more obvious. This is Yellowstone. I didn't take a picture of Old Faithful, so you just get to see kind of the clear water there of some of these beautiful places. So there's kind of a little inspiration. You know, I kind of picked some different places. This is Adventures Out West, although there are national parks on the East Coast that are just as gorgeous. There are national parks in, you know, Texas and Arkansas and all of these places that are wonderful. If you pay attention to the news, you know there's a new national park, New River Gorge National Park. New River Gorge is in West Virginia. It's gorgeous. It's always been managed by the National Park Service, but it has never been designated a national park. So that's our newest national park. I honestly don't even know if it's designated yet because it was like 60 days after the bill passed, and it was tucked in one of the Corona relief packages. So kind of just interesting thing that national parks, we just got a bunch of them. So the model of how we're going to do the presentation today is going to talk about, kind of show you a slide like this one here, and then I'm going to show you some pictures of how I've applied those things into the presentation. So if you are planning to go out west, my assumption is many of you are going to be going to national parks. There are many beautiful places, some people say prettier than a lot of the national parks that aren't just as well advertised, but most of you are going to start with the national park. So as you're planning these trips, I'm going to encourage you to go to the National Park website first and read as much as you can. And I'm going to say read as much as you can about camping and lodging and the temperature and the time of year that you should visit and when it's really busy and if there's amenities, like are you camping, are you RVing, are you tent camping, are you staying in hotels, are you doing the private like Airbnb sort of thing. That sort of planning is great to read about, but don't get any thoughts in your head yet. Because I'm going to give you a couple pointers of why you might want to rethink your time frame on some of these things. And here's kind of why. So this next picture that you'll see is your time frame. This is why, right? So this is Glacier National Park. It's actually Glacier National Park on our side and Glacier International Peace Park, because this is one of our national parks that goes into Canada. And this is the Going to the Sun Road. So Glacier National Park is very gorgeous, very, very big. And you're in, you kind of start outside of Kalispell, Montana, southwest corner. That's where it's real gorgeous. And then you want to go up over the mountains, up on the other side to get some of those pictures. Going to the Sun Road is about 40 miles, I think, one way. And in the wintertime, even now, going to the Sun Road, you can go like 8 miles, right? Because this is what happens, right? It snows a lot. And there's not a lot, I mean, you can hike and do sort of different things, but for most people going to visit, going to the Sun Road does not open until later than you think it does. So just for half a second, just in your head, think like what date would all of this snow when they're using this equipment to clear the road. Get it in your head when you think you would be able to go visit Glacier National Park with going to the Sun Road. So you have 3 seconds, just think of a date in your head. So you've got it. So now let's jump ahead to this next slide, and you'll see these are some of the time frames of when Going to the Sun Road has been opened in the past, right, since 2000. So if there's a letter next to the date, you can kind of ignore that one because that means there's some special circumstance. Like if you look at this year, Going to the Sun Road didn't open until July 13th, right? They obviously didn't have as many staff out there working, clearing the road and those sort of things, so it just wasn't open. But even if you look at all those other previous years, there's only a couple years when that road was open in May. So if you think you're going to leave and go for Memorial Day, or you're done with school in June, the first week of June, and you're going to fly out to Montana or drive out to Montana, right? Even though it takes longer to drive, going to the Sun Road still is not going to be open for you. Their goal is to have it open by July 4th every year. And as you can see, they're pretty close to getting that every year for the past 20 years. So this is also true for other roads. They don't have a slide about it, but like Rocky Mountain National Park, Ridge Road, the road that goes from basically Estes Park, Colorado, down over southwest to the west side of Rocky Mountain National Park. It's very similar. They try to get open by Memorial Day. And so a month sooner, but still not as early as you probably think, just because of where we live, right? In April and May, yeah, we're in Cleveland, we get some snow, but in April and May, we're thinking about, putting on shorts and ditching the jackets for sweatshirts, where April and May in a lot of national parks, especially out west, it's still snowing, right? So that's just a consideration. I encourage you to adjust your time frame so that if you think you're going to go in June, or you're like, oh, let's start at Memorial Day, know that not every amenity is going to be open. You want to adjust for other things, so this is kind of in the summer, let's say the spring-summer kind of the time frame. But then in the other end, like in October, which is this next slide, it's harder to see, but this is just a screenshot of my phone, and it's a picture of a high wind warning. So there's lots of wind, it's really cold, and this was October 14th, right? So in the springtime, some roads are still closed because of the snowpack, but high wind warning, really cold, October 14th. I knew that, I was in for a treat. It had already snowed that day, and this is from this previous year. Went to Rocky Mountain National Park in southern Utah in October, and it was cold and windy. So this is the night we actually, myself and my wife and 3 kids, all ended up sleeping in the van because about 10:30 we had said, this is enough, we're not going to be in our tent anymore. And in the morning, as we were driving around, we saw many tents that had just been completely destroyed, and people crawling out of their vehicles and that sort of thing. So just know that seasons last longer and they start a lot sooner than what you would expect. So it's also true for other places like national parks, southern Utah, Arizona, Grand Canyon. Those are still high elevation. So Lake Erie's 600, 800 feet elevation, where even Grand Canyon, you're like, oh, southern Utah, Arizona, gorgeous. Still higher elevations, still pretty cold. So just things to think about. If you've rethought your time frame, right? So you've kind of figured out maybe when you want to go by reading the website about the national parks. This next slide just says, just the simple words here, but I want you to plan something challenging. So Ashley, go ahead and jump ahead. They can see the next slide there. Just plan something challenging and don't be a parking lot visitor. So my encouragement to you is don't be a parking lot visitor in the sense of, I couldn't find the stat about it because I think most stats are just made up anyway. But anecdotally, by visiting national parks, you can just watch, right? If you're out for a while, you can watch the turnover in a parking lot, and it's very quick, right? So not many people are getting off that parking lot and getting too far. And this is a good example of why you don't want to stay in the parking lot, okay? So I understand that not everyone can hike super, super far or super, super long. But if you prepare for it, you're going to get pictures hopefully like this. And even if you don't get the picture like this, like I said, I'm no amazing photographer. This just happened, right? So this was in Glacier National Park. I hiked up. This was Sperry Glacier, I want to say, because there's Sperry Chalet, which is a place you can actually hike up to and stay. This was a spot where this wonderful little mountain goat, he was just there during lunch, and I was able to take that picture. So this was something that I was able to do because I wasn't I wasn't within 500 feet of the parking lot. I make the joke, and I know other people do, about, you go to the national park, and you're in the parking lot, you go to the visitor center, you buy the t-shirt, you maybe do a little, stroll around the lake or something like that, and that's your only experience. And if that's what you're able to do, that's amazing, that's wonderful, that's great. But like I said, try to do a little bit more than you think, and take the time to prepare for that so that you can do just maybe a little bit more. And I'll talk about why that's true too in a little bit. This next photo, I didn't have to hike super far for. This was just a lot shorter. So actually, go ahead and jump ahead. It was only, this was only a mile from a parking lot, and this wasn't even in a national park. This was southwest of Denver on the start of the Colorado Trail. But it's an old, it's a road, and these are there's wildlife along the road that you get to see sometimes. So kind of like wildlife like this, it's just something that you get to see. So actually, has anyone asked any questions yet? I know I'm not sure if people can see screen super well, if the photos are all advancing or not. No questions? Okay, cool. So some other things as you're looking at the picture of this goat, you might be looking at a picture of some other things. I'm not totally sure what's on the screen right now, but I want to let you know that nothing out west is super close. So I'm going to encourage you, and this has to do with the kind of get off the parking lot thing, is do what you want to do when you're there, because chances are you're not going to be going back right away. So I know myself, I'm planning my next, more than 2-week vacation out west for like 3 years from now. So I'm not planning it, but just in my head, I was like, oh, that'd be a good year. There's other reasons for that as well. But nothing is super close. So if you think you've got 2 weeks or even 1 week, you're like, oh, I'm going to see all these national parks. Even national parks that are close are still often 2 to 4 hours apart. So like Southwest Utah is kind of your best example of that, because there's Zion, there's Arches, there's Canyonlands, there's all the places around Moab to see. There's Capitol Reef National Park is there, you can go through that. That's 4 national parks, I think. And if you think you're going to just do the Grand Canyon, that's like a 280-mile detour one way. So those are where the parks are close, but they're still kind of far apart. So we talked about adjusting your plan. Something I want to encourage you to do if you're a maximizer, so if you're someone that likes to get the most out of the experience and you're not a satisficer, right? Someone that's satisfied and sufficing, like kind of, oh, that's good enough. If you want the best experience, take some more time to research things. That way you can kind of categorize in your brain, like, this is the one thing I really want to do, and I'm going to schedule my days around that. And this, for me, is one of them. So this was, this photo here is just me on my bike, but I wanted to bike up to 10,000 feet elevation, and I had to kind of adjust my day for this. So, like I said, I was there with family and kids, and this was a I skip lunch kind of a thing. I leave late morning, and then I bike as much as I can. And then, we had planned to meet somewhere for the afternoon where my kids could be playing in a creek. And yes, I know I said it was snowing in Rocky Mountain National Park when we were there, but it was also 75 degrees and you could play in the creek. So just some different things. Something else I want to touch on is as you're planning these things, something that's smart to do that a lot of people don't think to do is to consider searching the towns or the cities you're going to be in and look for like their special events. Now, I didn't really have to do this too much on my most recent out west trip in fall of 2020 because most big events were canceled. But there are certain events that you may or may not want to be a part of during those time frames. So my example, and I think the example for a lot of college professors teaching people to go out west and lead programs and take college kids places, their example was always Sturgis in South Dakota. So huge motorcycle rally, really close to Badlands National Park, fairly close to even like Yellowstone, the Grand Tetons, Mount Rushmore, Crazy Horse, Wall Drug, Wall, South Dakota, Devil's Tower, right? And I'm using relatively close as in, 3-4 hour drive. So if you're into motorcycles, the first week of August is a great week to go to those places, to go to the Badlands, to go to Mount Rushmore. But if you're not into motorcycles, that might be a horrible time to go there. Absolutely horrible, right? If you're going for quiet and some other reasons, you don't want to be around that. So it doesn't have to be a major thing, and sometimes just a phone call is helpful for that kind of information. But just with the internet, people are on their phones. It's stuff we can do all the time. When I was planning trips out west most recently, I had things on my phone that were just open in my web browser all the time, and then I could look at something, kind of bank it in my head, and then maybe I would jump to another website to read about that as well. So, and also know that I am a maximizer. I want to research everything so that I can figure out the best possible hike and the best possible this, and then kind of move forward from there. So I've mentioned the bike picture, kind of why I want to do that, but then you also need to plan for other things. So this next slide is going to just be, it's a picture of the United States, right? And these are, we all know COVID's a thing, and I had to avoid certain states so that when I came back, A, my kids could go to school, and B, I could go to work without quarantining and different things. So this picture is actually from November. When I was in Utah, I was okay, and I got to come through Missouri, and not have to quarantine or anything. So that was great. So there's things you want to plan for that can be challenging, and you want to be able to adjust for those. Yeah.
We had a really great related question, and it was, so during COVID, when you planned, what were some of those extra precautions, and how was it different from years past?
Yeah, so I guess the big thing, aside from years past, being I had more kids with me, because I have 3 kids now, but every trip before then I didn't have 3. But yeah, I mean, the big thing was I was needed to be more flexible as far as what the plans were. So in planning, I could read about certain things. The big major thing, Rocky Mountain National Park, reservation only, even to get in the park, right? You had to have a permit for a time frame to get into the park. And I think because things like that were so successful this year, even like, having to reserve a boat rental when you're going kayaking somewhere local, people found that that's really nice, right? I know I'm going to be able to do this in this 2-hour block. So there were some things like that, and that was all kind of clear on the website with the National Park Service. And it was like, hey, you got to get a permit for this. Other challenges, like capacity was way reduced. So while the campsites were all sold out, the campground was not full. So it says the campground was full online and in person with signs. But when you go into the campground, there were definitely things that were open. Private campgrounds were the same way. Reduced amenities, I would say. Bathrooms being a big one. Accessibility to water was a little bit challenged. That's something that we worked through. So the planning was, I knew I was going to have to be flexible. But with that, I was still able to plan a lot of the things. So I'll give an example before we jump ahead here. So that was a great question. I'm going to keep answering it. In southern Utah, I knew that there were so many hikes I could do, and I wanted to bike, certain things around Moab, and we wanted to see some other things. So I had a list of those things, and here's what it is, here's where it is, here's maybe the best time of day or the recommended time of day, and I listed certain things out that I thought we might be able to do, but I knew we weren't going to be able to go to all of them. So when we showed up into Arches National Park, when we got there on a Thursday, the park was already full. So it was basically closed until we came, we could come back later and see if enough cars had left or whatever. So we had to tweak certain things. Lodging was some of the other ones. You'll see a slide here in a minute that tells me my plan was to go to the Grand Canyon and go through New Mexico on the way home. But New Mexico was really strict on their quarantine protocol, like checking licenses during reservations and that sort of thing. So we didn't do that. We just took that whole plan and we went back over into Colorado, and we went southeast and then came home through Texas and Oklahoma. So we definitely adjusted our plan, and that was to the fact that we didn't even make reservations on certain spots. Or when I was making reservations, and this is totally true, I had to know the cancellation date so that on a certain day during my trip, I knew I had to call if I was going to cancel that reservation and not be penalized for it, or $10 off my $130 hotel for the night or whatever it was. So definitely some changes. I just had to remain flexible with campgrounds and that sort of thing. And another example of that, just from my recent trip, because that's what you asked about, I had reserved Rocky Mountain National Park. I reserved 2 of my campsites. And then the third night, I didn't reserve it. But I always travel just because of work and whatever reason. I'm always arriving when all the amenities are shutting down. So I had reservations for the last 2 possible nights in one of the campgrounds in Rocky Mountain National Park. But I knew the third day was first come, first serve. So if I was already in that site, I knew that site was mine. But I didn't want to book that day because of another reason, which was wildfires. The Cameron Peak Fire in Rocky Mountain National Park was going to potentially close the park. And it did. When we were in southern Utah, Rocky Mountain National Park was completely closed for a couple of days. So we reserved certain things, but then we left things open so that we could leave early if we needed to. But good question. So if you have other questions, please ask. So this next one, I got actually a question for you. So this is a national park. I want someone, at least one person, please comment. I know you're maybe eating dinner or having a snack or putting kids to bed or whatever, but hop on there and let me know if you think you know where this national park is. So it might be a little hard to see, but there's a bridge in the background. There's obviously water in the background, and it looks like this person, me, is cross-country skiing. So see if we get any guesses here. It's the wonder of technology. Everyone just wanting to listen today. That's fine. So this is Cuyahoga Valley National Park, right? I didn't have to go very far, but still, you could plan my trip, right? This is close to my house. I can take advantage of this all the time and really enjoy just the national park that's close at hand. So, all right. So this next slide talks a little bit about lodging and mode of transportation, how you're going to get there. So your lodging might be determined by how you're going to get there. So you can definitely fly with backpacking gear, like small tents, small backpacks, small camp stoves, that sort of thing. If you're car camping, you definitely can still fly, right? I've done combinations where one person flies and other people drive, or you both fly, with the anticipation of, depending how you do food, you need to then buy a cooler or rent a cooler from somewhere if that's a thing, if you don't want to go out for all of your meals. So sometimes your lodging, your mode of travel is going to dictate your lodging, right? So sometimes the whole fly and then be able to cook all of my meals, if you're not going to one national park or you're not going to like one area for like a week and you've got like an Airbnb, or you have a place with like a kitchen, that sort of thing, it's a little bit harder to do if you're trying to car camp and fly. There are third parties and companies that will essentially rent equipment and say, it's going to be there for you when you arrive, either at the airport. There's companies that do that, or there's some vendors that say, I will have the stuff at the campsite for you. But know that some national parks have said, we're not allowing that anymore, right? They're not allowing somebody else to basically check in as you and set up a tent and everything so that you can kind of have this balance between camping, glamping, and a hotel, right? It's kind of this in-between land. So there's lots of options out there. I don't think I need to go into detail too much about public and private campgrounds, Airbnb, all these other companies where you can basically stay in somebody else's home. Budget is going to determine this, obviously. My trip, most recently out west, we did about half and half camping, half hotels. Some of that is, we have a little, not even 2 at the time that we did this. And it was cold, right? There were times we ate meals in our van just because it was too windy and too cold to eat food outside, or our food just got cold too quickly. And there were times where we're camping and it's 75 degrees and everything was just fine. So the big thing here, I guess, is national parks. If you haven't been really to any out west, a lot of national parks out west and even on the East Coast, the amenities at public campgrounds are pretty limited. We're talking water and bathrooms. That's really it. I don't know of any national park, and I'm sure there's an exception to this, but every national park that I've been to, most of the time there's not showers, right? Again, that's not true for everyone. Like if you're in mountain environment, you're around where water's more accessible, that's something. But I don't know of any national park in the southwestern part of the United States that has showers as part of a campground fee, right? You can pay for showers somewhere else or in town, or a third party, a vendor, concessionaire has that, but oftentimes that's not part of your campground fee, just with reservations through the National Park Service. So if we jump ahead, I'm sure we've got some pictures here. I know this is hard to see, but this was my simple spreadsheet with where we went, how far it was going to be to drive, how long it was going to take between different parks. It has where I was going, it has my sleep location, so maybe the campground, the name of the hotel, a reservation link, and then if I had paid or not. And this is what I kind of had kept track. This is also what I sent to parents and in-laws, so they kind of have a general idea of where I was. Although, like I said, we changed this plan, so it was just something we had to adapt. But this is the way for me to plan that kind of kept me on track with where we were at. And then also, I kept track of like southern Utah. It was very busy in October, and I didn't want to not get a campsite, so then I actually wrote what campgrounds had how many sites. So if one campground had 5 sites and one campground had 99 sites that were all first come, first serve, I went to the campground that had 99 first if I really needed to find that spot. So it just was a way to keep myself, and I encourage you to do something like this, even just through planning, even if you don't end up using it. So I had mentioned camping near Moab. And I mentioned at the beginning Bureau of Land Management, so this next slide shows where you can't camp and where you can camp. So there were lots of private campgrounds, and I'm going to step off screen just for a second, but there are lots of private campgrounds around Moab, but Moab is also a pretty small spot, so I could only camp certain days, and I had to get a hotel reservation for one night, because I promise you that was the only night left that I could find. We were arriving on a Thursday, and I could not find a hotel or a campground or anywhere to stay on Friday and Saturday. So I had to I paid more than I wanted to for a hotel on Thursday, with the idea of me being in a hotel on Thursday, then I could go to one of these Bureau of Land Management first come, first serve campgrounds, so that I could find a site, so that then I could have a site for the next 2 nights. And this is just a short little story, I guess. I had to wake up at 6 a.m. on Friday, so I was in a hotel Thursday. Thursday we came into Moab, in Arches National Park. You can see the purple there in the center. That's Arches National Park, and the bottom left purple is Canyonlands. Moab is really only one road wide, right? There's not a ton in Moab, and there were a lot of people there. So when we arrived in Arches on Thursday, we got there around like 11:30, and the park was closed. So Arches National Park has one entrance, and they had closed it because the parking lots and the roads are at capacity. So I knew I needed to wake up early to find a campground that I could spend the night in Friday, hoping someone was leaving one of the sites on Friday. And to make my long story short, I woke up at 6 a.m., left the hotel that we had Thursday night, and I left my family basically for a little bit to drive, to go to all these different campgrounds to try to find one open site. And by the time I was like 6 miles down a gravel road and I was at the 5th campground, I was like, I'm not going to find any. These are all full. So I stopped. I talked to somebody that was cooking breakfast. I said, look, I don't mean to be rude. Do you happen to be leaving today? And she's like, yeah, we're going to leave after breakfast. And I said, do you mind if it was a pay through an envelope system? So I I said, do you mind if I pay for my envelope and put my little tag behind yours? And when you leave, you can just take your tag, and if you allow me to set up my tent right now. So that's what I had to do to reserve a site for Friday and Saturday night. And I felt real bad about, bugging into someone's breakfast. Basically, it was probably 6:40, maybe 7 o'clock at that time. But that's the only way that I would have found a campsite that night. And that way I knew then we could go to Arches on Friday and enjoy the day and come back. And I had set up the tent at 6:30, 7 a.m. in the morning. And that was the only way I found a site. And when I was doing that, she's like, oh, don't worry, that's what we had to do too. So I don't know if 2020 was special circumstances, but you'll see in a minute here, Arches and Zion and Canyonlands, they've all become very popular recently. And there's a lot of people there. So national parks aren't necessarily busy, but the parking lots and the entrance areas definitely are at certain times of the year. So that was kind of the extreme that I had to go to find a site this time. And I imagine it's like that often. And also I learned that southern Utah and Moab area in October is generally very, very busy. So if we jump ahead to the next slide, this is not Bureau of Land Management property, but this is Bridger Teton National Forest. So this is the Grand Tetons. I love the Grand Tetons. This wasn't a busy time of year, right? So this is from a previous trip. I did not go to southern Utah and Grand Tetons in the same trip. They're like days apart. But this was just a great spot to camp, right? So the campground was not busy, and Jenny Lake, around Grand Tetons, Yellowstone, we had enjoyed that, that sort of thing. We were just looking for a more secluded place to camp. In national forests, Bureau of Land Management properties are great for that. If you're okay with less amenities. So if you're hearing me say like, oh, you can spend here where there's no water and no bathrooms for like days on end, that's not what I'm saying, right? We arrived here in the afternoon. We set up our tent. This is national forest. There's like some designated sites, and some it's kind of a free-for-all. But people have pretty good with designated sites and spots. So we set up our tent. We go back down. We visit the park. We have a good time. We make dinner, down in the park somewhere. We use the restrooms. We fill up water. We come back up. And then this was the view from my tent, right? So that's the Grand Tetons. This is the view from my tent, which is obviously a very different view than if you're around Jenny Lake at the campground there and you're just looking up. From Jenny Lake campground, I don't even think you can see the Grand Teton because there's mountains in front of it that block it, right? So just different views and different ideas for different people. So this is always true. This next slide, and there's not a lot of words on here, but I'll show pictures here of why this is important. So there's two things on the screen. Wake up early if you can, and then relax all day, visit late afternoon. This is true for national parks, but it's also true for any place that you're going to want to go, right? If you're doing hiking outside of Denver or outside of Boulder, things fill up quickly. So for my most recent trip out west, I drove because driving by yourself is easy, right? For me anyway. I can drive, not a problem. I got to Denver in a day and a half, not a problem. Not even tired, right? Just lots of podcasts and lots of driving. And my family flew. But then we went to Boulder, and hiking in Boulder, if we would try to hike at 9 a.m., all the parking lots would be full. There's just a lot of people enjoying things. So sometimes that means waking up early, and sometimes that means taking advantage of the hotel that you paid for and staying up until checkout, going out to lunch somewhere, and then going into the park in late afternoon when everybody else is leaving. So this isn't as like a detriment, but this next slide I want to show you, this is Arches because I use this as an example. So in Arches, this is Moab, southern Utah, very gorgeous. Arches is not as popular as Zion, and Canyonlands is not as popular as either of these. But this is from 2016, so these parks have seen explosive use over the time. But the big thing here to see is that red line, basically from March to October, and then even into some of November, that means parking lots and roads are full. And my example of this is in this year, I said I arrived in Moab. Arches entrance to Moab is like 5 miles out of town, off Route 70, south 20 miles or so. I arrived Thursday before lunch, and Arches was closed, right? Friday morning, I told you I woke up early, and I went and got a campsite, and my family had breakfast, because we were in like a cabin thing in Moab. We packed up quickly, and we were at the entrance to Arches by 9:05 on a Friday, and it was already full. So we passed it, we went over to Canyonlands, and we enjoyed the day in Canyonlands. Not nearly as busy, still gorgeous and amazing. And that's when I did some biking on the way home. The rest of my family drove back into Moab, back to eventually go to that campsite that I had found in the morning. So our plan had to change where I was camping that night. My plan was to just enjoy a secluded campsite in this canyon with like walls going up forever. But Arches was closed Thursday by, we were there like 11, 12, I don't quite remember. Friday, I know it was closed by 9:05, and they close it and then they don't let a ton of cars in. So Saturday, I knew it was going to be really busy. So before 6 a.m., I was in the gate of Arches National Park on Saturday morning. So woke up all those kids super early, put them in the car, we went to Arches and enjoyed our time while we were there. But we were in the park before 6 a.m. And then Delicate Arch. So if you've ever seen a picture of Arches or of an arch in Utah, it's on their license plate. That's Delicate Arch. Everybody wants to see that at sunrise, so they all drive there. And I kid you not, we were not doing that because I knew it was crazy busy, and we had found other stuff to do in the morning that early, like drink hot chocolate and cook our breakfast in the parking lot. But by 7:20, the park was closed on Saturday. And I don't know that for sure, but there was a stream of cars coming in down the hill towards Delicate Arch. We were leaving that area and we were going to some other place, and then the stream of cars just stopped. And that was 20 after 7, and that was probably 10 miles in the park. So probably around 7 on a Saturday, Arches was closed. And I know they don't just open it like one car for one car. They let a lot of cars go off. So if they're busy parks, right, we go back to the second or third slide of the presentation today, it's do your research on the website, right? If you try to go to Rocky Mountain National Park and they continue the reservation system where you have to enter the park between 9 a.m. and noon, or 12 and 3, or 3 and 6, and you don't know that, you're going to be really disappointed. If you go to Arches and you think you're going to get in the park at 9 o'clock and enjoy 5 hours in the park from 9 to 2 on a Saturday, you're not going to get in that time, right? So you need to kind of, like I said, that first slide is plan your time frame and then start reading a whole bunch and then adjust kind of your time frame and your expectation, just because national parks are so busy, right? In the 70s and 80s, I wasn't around for all of those years. They were not as busy as they are now. And even the places that aren't. So that day when we arrived in Moab on Thursday, we just did a hike that was in and around Moab, right? It wasn't national park land. I don't even remember what land it was on, probably Bureau of Land Management property. And it was still a pretty busy hike. You'll see a picture of it here in just a little bit, but it was still gorgeous, right? So it's not just national parks that are busy. It's all of these places. And I know my experience most recently is during COVID, and a lot of people did travel because they're like, well, my kids are remote, I'm working remote, I'm going to do it anyway. And that was, it was my attitude, that's why we went. Things are still busy, right? So adjust your time, figure out where you're going to go, or be okay with the time frame that you do have and just to set your expectations so things work well. Another question?
Yeah, we've got a great one, and I'm not sure of the answer off the top of my head. Maybe you are, Dan.
We'll see.
But the question is, what is the elevation at Rocky Mountain?
So it depends. I believe the Meadows campground that we were in is around 7,000 or 8,000 feet. I know for a fact that the top of the road going from northeast Estes Park to southwest is just over 12,000 feet. So 12,007, I believe, is what the sign says when you hike up, when you park towards the top of the road and hike up. So it's significant, right? Denver is the mile-high city, so that's what, 5,820 feet or so. I'm sure they're not actually at exactly a mile. And then you drive up an hour and a half to Estes Park. You're going uphill the whole time. And then Rocky Mountain National Park is just even further. So significant elevation. And that's why starting at the website to figure out kind of temperature is great. So, yeah.
Nice. And we've got another really good, we've got a lot of really good questions.
This is good. Perfect.
So what time are the parks open that you can get in?
So, again, that's going to depend. Most of them are open all the time. So there are times where you'll come up to national park gatehouses and there's nobody there, right? Sometimes that's staffing, and sometimes that's just non-busy hours. In preparing this presentation, Arches National Park, I know it's a good example, has a webcam at the main entrance because there's only one entrance to Arches, at least for non-four-wheel drive vehicles. There's a webcam, so you can see, and there's only one car there all day, and I kept refreshing it a whole bunch because I was going to use a picture. I ended up not using a screenshot of that, but so it depends. So most of them are open all the time, right? 24/7, all the time for entrance and going in. Now, there doesn't mean amenities are going to be open for any of those things. Campgrounds, a lot of campgrounds close down in the winter. All the vendors, like if you're trying to do a boat ride in Yosemite in the winter, that's not happening. If you're trying to go to Glacier and do a boat ride, that's what I meant to say. I don't think there are boat rides in Yosemite. But trying to go rock climbing in Yosemite, you're going to be limited in the winter. You're trying to go horseback riding in Theodore Roosevelt National Park. That's all going to get shut down after Labor Day, basically. So I'm, like I said, kind of joked about, I'm really good at visiting national parks before Memorial Day and after our holiday in October, second week in October. So after that, a lot of your vendors, those sort of things, shut down as people go back to school and that sort of thing. So in every national park, you see a big dip in August of when that visitation goes way down. Even with Cleveland Metro Parks, we see that as kids go back to school. Our program numbers dip in August generally, and then they go back up once people have readjusted to school and kind of the new normal and that sort of thing. So you can find out really, really detailed stats on parks. The National Park Service has a stat website where you can search the parks and entrances and how many cars and how many entrances and that sort of thing. So one of the number of things that I looked at, Arches, like I mentioned a lot, has one entrance, has 1.6 million visitors, I think. Cuyahoga Valley National Park here, the traffic counters that they have, there's 16 of them, I believe, and the visitation's 2.3 million. So you can't just look at the numbers and say that park's busy and this one's not. Cuyahoga Valley National Park obviously gets a lot of cars coming through, but they're not all going to visit the park. Great. Same thing with Great Smoky, the Great Smokies, North Carolina, that area. Lots of visitation just because population masses are close, right? Atlanta's close. Some of these other big cities are close. Where out west, visitation is still really busy. It's just things are farther apart, so when people are there, you're kind of there. But yeah, parks are open all the time. So this next slide, there's going to be a link. You can't click on that link. It will be in the chat box in a little bit, but don't click it because I don't know what will happen. I don't know if you get kicked out of the presentation or not, but we have a couple more slides. We'll finish up, and then we'll have some time for questions as well. Ashley and I aren't going to run out or anything like that, so we'll keep answering your questions if you have them, even if it's a little past 8 o'clock. So the video, if you'll have this in the chat box in just a little bit. Keep it so when we're done, scroll back up and click that if you're interested. This is a video of a moose from a trip that I got to take. So this was in Glacier, probably 11 years ago, I want to say. And it's just a cool picture to show you. This was late afternoon, and again, I didn't get up early this time. I hiked later in the afternoon, and we got lucky. So you don't always have to get up late or early to get in the park. They're gorgeous no matter what time. The National Park Service is actually really good at advertising. They have like their little magazines that they give out basically. It's like if you're only coming to the park during the day, you're missing half the park. So I know Yellowstone's really good at saying that. Any of the southwestern desert ones, like if you're not coming to the park at night, you're missing out. And that's where, if you're camping, get up in the middle of the night, wake up at 2, or adjust your schedule. Sleep in the afternoon in a park in like a picnic area, and enjoy that, right? Take a nap, enjoy it, so that then you can be up past sunrise, or before sunrise, after sunset, so you can see a lot of different things. And you obviously have to plan for those things. So, other thing we have, so the next picture, this is Arches, just very gorgeous, just showing you, there are a couple people in this picture, but we went later, so there wasn't, quite as many people. Other ways to prepare, some people like to get their vehicle ready. So here's just a kind of a quick little list of things. Think about the little things, think about water, think about where you're going to put dirty clothes and when you're going to do laundry. If you're in an RV, sometimes all of these things are very accessible, right? If it's cold, you cook your food. But if you're camping, have stoves, or you're going out to eat, you need to plan those things. So where are you going to put the cooler so you can get lunch easily? Where are you going to have enough snacks? That sort of thing. Think about other things. Lots of electronics these days. Phones, cameras, flashlights, they're all rechargeable. So if you're in your car mostly and not doing the hotel thing, electricity is not common at a lot of national parks. It is. The more popular ones have lots of RV sites. But just think about those things. So here's some pictures that just real easy. This is just a shelf that was in the back of our SUV. This allowed us to store things on top and then have food bins underneath. So we have a food bin. As family gets bigger, you start to get bike racks. You can get simpler. This next picture is just like a simple shelf. This is actually my van. Not during my trip. I had to go back out and take this picture because I hadn't had a picture of it. I'll show you a picture at the end of what a van looks like after a 2.5-week trip. But this way we could store our dishes that we had washed and they were able to dry up there, but still access our cooler, and then the right side, again, food bins, sleeping bags, tent, that sort of thing. The extreme would be the next slide, where people build out full kitchens essentially on sliders, and that sort of thing. This person is a buddy of mine. I said, hey, can I use your picture? I know you're excited about this. And this was for in bear country. So some places have lockers where you have to store your food, and some places just say you have to store your food in your vehicle. So this is how they were able to have like a gourmet cook set, basically this crazy setup. But then just by lifting some 2x4s and sliding it into the van, all of the cooking is gone, right? Obviously there's some safety considerations with turning a stove off when, if that bear did come into camp and you need to get rid of that quickly. But in general, just another extreme. The next picture, kind of extreme again. Again, this is the one picture that's not mine. Kind of the overland thing. A lot of people are kind of getting into that, where you've got your rooftop tent, you have a refrigerator, you have solar panels, or you're outfitting a van instead of a big RV, because some RVs are limited where you can visit, national parks and bridge restrictions and tunnel restrictions. So some people are outfitting vehicles like this, or like big box cargo vans. I'm sure we've seen them. And then just the last couple slides and we'll finish up. And if you have questions, type those questions in now. That way we can field them kind of really quickly towards the end. But if you're taking kids, some things that seem obvious but aren't always obvious. Plan lots of snacks. They end up becoming like bribing tools. Keep hiking. You've got this. Keep your routine. I'm going to show some pictures here in a minute of what routine is like, so that you can keep that. I do say practice this close to home. So we did lots of hikes just locally beforehand so that my kids, granted we carried the 20-month-old, but so my 5-year-old could hike 6 miles, right? So we did that just, over kind of the course of the late summer. We're out a lot trying to stay active so that we could enjoy the time that we're out there. So it was used, they were used to their shoes, they were used to their hiking pants, but then they still were able to take their binoculars and kid things. I wanted to be polite. It's just a bunch of crap that they bring along on the trip, but they want to have it. So we would have like a little bucket for them to keep their toys in, or just their backpack so they could have their water bottle and their snack. But don't put too much in there because you end up carrying a lot of that for them as well. So here's just a couple pictures. Scroll through. This is just some of my family. They like to read in the morning, so you can't really see, but they got their Kindles and they're enjoying reading. We like to cook together, so I tried to cook a lot. Gave some tasks to my 8-year-old. That's the next slide there. And then we also kept routine a little bit with kind of reward using a television or a screen for games or something like that. And then also sometimes it was cold, so we ended up sitting in the van to eat. But just not that we use technology all the time. We're mostly outside, but there's just a nice time sometimes where that routine things they're used to, then it's not always go, 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 right? You're planning some downtime so that you can do these things. This is another thing that I didn't love doing all the time, but loved watching my kids. This next slide is probably one of the prettiest playgrounds I've ever been to. And granted, this is in Breckenridge, so lots of money to build a cool playground. But just, this, we weren't even stopping in Breckenridge. This was the way home. We decided, I said we didn't go in the Grand Canyon because we were avoiding New Mexico. So we went back into Colorado, and then we went south, and we went through Breckenridge, and we stopped there. So other family things you can do. Ice cream is always good. Granted, this is not from a trip out west. This is from an Acadia trip. But when you're near Ben and Jerry's, even again, late October, you better stop. So you're going to get a lot of cool pictures going out west. Even if you don't have a camera, you're going to get a lot of good experiences. So this next picture shows that. Again, I'm not a great photographer. I know my composition and my rule of threes. I'm breaking all sorts of things, but we planned for this, right? So kids hiking in the creek. This was a long hike that we got to do, and this was just a fun place, something for them to do, right? It took a little bit longer, but it was something that they were in control of and something that they really got to enjoy doing. So doing your trips out west, it's not always going to be, this perfect, amazing, beautiful thing. You're going to find, things aren't always Instagram worthy, but if you planned a little bit, or you have like a more laissez-faire attitude with like, well, this is beautiful, it's going to be good enough, it's true, right? You're going to have an amazing time, kind of regardless. So just get those expectations. I don't want you to plan a trip and then not plan it well enough that when you get there, there's all these like things in the way or things you didn't think about, like you're not allowed in the park, right? Again, I'm kind of painting that, it's kind of the grim side of the picture, that places can be busy, but that's not always the case, right? They're still busy, but you just need to plan for that and adjust it so that your expectations of your trip or your vacation or you've saved for a year to go to Alaska or whatever it is, there's stresses in people's lives that if, that's something you can't get over, you need to be able to plan for those things so that then it's not stressful because, you still have money for it, you still have the time for it, and it was worth your vacation time, right? But not everything will be perfect, so here's the next couple pictures, and then we'll finish up with questions. So this is that 20-month-old I was talking about. Who knows? She probably didn't want her hat or did want her hat or something. And, we were that family sometimes where we're just picking kids up because they're screaming on the trail and, hiking along with them. So that things happen. Other things when you're out west, for any amount of time, depending what you're doing, you're going to have to do laundry. So this is just us doing laundry in the front of the van. Like we did laundry. We're at a private campground. It was like a KOA or something. They had laundry facilities. We did our laundry, and then our kids were sleeping in the tent, so we folded laundry in the van. So hopefully you'll get to see cool places. I promised a picture of what my van would look like towards the end, which is going to be the last picture here. So it gets become dirty, right? We were showing this to staff members. That is a gallon of maple syrup. but it's not maple syrup. It's just water. It's just a strong, sturdy container. But you plan really well. Your van's still going to look like this. Your vehicle's still going to have stuff everywhere. You're going to have sand and dirt, and you're going to bring all this stuff home. And you're probably going to lose something or misplace something. But hopefully all the memories that you have from being out west or going to national park trips is something that you're going to be able to remember, even if you, like I said, even if you don't take a single picture, you're going to still have that memory of that beautiful place that is totally worth it. So if you have questions, we'll kind of answer them. I have seen Ashley type in there. I know she's been answering some of them. I do want to mention we have more of these. So we have Skills and Thrills every other week starting tonight. In 2 weeks, we have paddling Lake Erie Water Trail and the Allegheny River in western Pennsylvania. And then basically a month from tonight, we're going to be talking about climbing, rock climbing in Ohio and beyond. So same thing, lots of inspirational pictures with hopefully minimal text so that we can hopefully inspire you guys to get outside and do some of these adventures on your own. And if you don't have, you don't feel that you have the skills for these adventures, hopefully it's something that you can come to Cleveland Metro Parks where we can teach you these skills and give you the confidence you need to really get out there. So I don't know if there's any other questions, but if not, we'll jump up on the last slide. This website is where you're going to go to find all of our upcoming programs. So again, I'll kind of step off the screen here, but this is a great place to go. If you scroll down, all of our programs are listed.